Hi, everyone. Welcome to Build Up California's July network meeting.
Hola a todos y bienvenidos a la reunión de julio de Build Up California.
My name is Samantha Payton. I'm a policy and program officer at the Low Income Investment Fund, and I help lead our Build Up California initiative.
Mi nombre es Samantha Payton y yo estoy de administrativa y directora en LEAF y vamos a comenzar la reunión del día de hoy.
As you can tell, we're doing consecutive interpretation. This meeting will be multilingual, and we're going to start simultaneous interpretation momentarily. I'm joined by two LIFT colleagues, Isabel Donahoe and Catherine Perez. So you might see them pop up in the chat during the meeting. They're here to help me out.
Como pueden darse cuenta, estamos interpretando consecutivamente. Esta reunión es multilingüe y vamos a empezar la interpretación simultánea en un momento. Estoy aquí con dos de mis colegas de LEAF, Isabel Donahoe y Catherine Pérez. Si las ven en el chat, esta es la razón.
So for English listeners, you will need to select English when the interpretation is turned on. I will now show the same slide in Spanish and let Ellis, our interpreter, repeat my instructions.
Para las personas que hablan inglés, tienen que seleccionar el idioma inglés en el globito cuando se prenda la interpretación. Ahora vamos a la diapositiva en español. Lo mismo, las personas que hablan español tienen que seleccionar el idioma español en el globo terráqueo.
So I'm now going to turn on the interpretation and please select the language that you would like to hear.
Ahora voy a aprender la interpretación. Por favor, presionen el idioma que quieran escuchar.
All right. So before we dive into our topic today, childcare and climate resilient infrastructure, I wanted to give a little background on why LIF and Build Up are even bringing a climate lens to our childcare facilities work. Angie Garling, LIFT's Senior Vice President of Early Care and Education, sat on the U.S. Early Years Climate Action Task Force in 2023 and helped inform this report that makes clear the specific vulnerabilities children have to climate change and the ways that our communities could be reimagined to mitigate these effects. So this report has recommendations for interventions at the national, state, and local level, and it's been guiding a lot of Build Up's work recently as it relates to climate change. We like using this to talk a lot about what can be done at the community level, and I think it's a really great place to start when thinking about connections between children, children's health, our built environment, and climate change, and how we can all tackle this problem. So, like I said, this is a multilingual meeting. We are joined first by an English speaker, the executive director of Climate Resilient Communities, a nonprofit based in East Palo Alto. She's going to talk to us about CRC's work and specifically their Resilient Homes program. It's not childcare specific, but we in the childcare field have a lot to learn, I think, from how resilient infrastructure is being done in the private homes sector. So Violet's going to speak. I'm going to make that really tangible connection between Violet's presentation and how it relates to our work in childcare facilities and the ways in which childcare specifically impacts children. And finally, we're going to be joined by Angelica Sorto. She is a home-based provider in EPA as well. And she's going to talk about how she used some infrastructure grant funds to make climate resilient infrastructure changes to her program, which is really exciting. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Violet. If you have questions during her presentation, please put them in the chat. If we don't get to them, we always pledge during these meetings to collect the comments, read through them, write responses to questions that went unanswered, and send them out with the recording. Violet, I'll turn it over to you and let me know when you'd like the slides advanced.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Let me check. Oh, it's afternoon. Sorry, I was in meetings all day. I wasn't sure if this is We're after lunch. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Samantha, for the invitation to share my work and especially to the audience today. I'm very happy to be sharing this with many of you who are serving our communities, especially our young ones. So a little bit about Climate Resilient Communities. We are a community-based organization serving communities like East Palo Alto, North Fair Oaks, Bellhaven of Menlo Park, San Bruno, South San Francisco. And most of our work is around building, working with community leaders to identify vulnerabilities to climate change. And then we work with them to prioritize adaptation projects that we then go out and seek funding to implement. So right now, for example, in East Palo Alto, we have we have a couple of projects there, and one of them is like a rain garden project where we're building rain gardens with homeowners. The other program that we implement is our Resilient Home program. So we're very new, meaning that we started in 2020 as an organization, but we are very strong and we are doing a lot more with many communities that we want to serve. Next slide, please. I just want to share a little bit with you, and I think it's important. The goal and the mission of my organization is to work with frontline marginalized communities. What that means is communities of color. We work with communities that are faced with many burdens, including poverty, pollution burden, housing burden, even energy burden, meaning that many of our families that we serve in our communities um, are not able to meet some of some of their needs. So we work in communities like East Palo Alto, North Fair Oaks, Bellhaven of Menlo Park, and also communities that are communities of color. I work very closely with many of those communities that don't speak English. Most of the families that we serve are Spanish speakers or from Samoa, from Tonga, or other places other than the wealthy white folks here in the Bay Area. Next slide, please. We also work in places that, like I mentioned, have been marginalized. And I wanted to share this with you just to show the disparities, right? So, we work in East Palo Alto, as you can see, the vast difference between Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and East Palo Alto. Most of the time, the cities that we serve are under-resourced, cities that have been disinvestment happening, like there hasn't been a lot of investment. The services are poor, and also these communities have been are faced with contamination sites. All the things that wealthy communities didn't want are dumped in the communities that we serve. So it's a lot to do with environmental justice, a lot to do with elevating the concerns in the communities like East Palo Alto. Next slide, please. And also, these are the communities that are also the most vulnerable to climate change. One of the things that we looked at is that the existing adaptive capacity, how much resources do we have to respond to heat waves? How much resources do we have to respond to sea level rise? If we go underwater, do we have money for flood insurance? So because these communities of color that have been marginalized, that have been redlined, limited resources, because they face many disparities, they are also the most vulnerable to climate change, right? Homes in East Palo Alto, most of the homes don't have cooling systems. So what do you think? How are they handling, how are they adapting to the increased number of heat waves? So we think about these communities because they are also the most vulnerable. So this is a map of East Palo Alto, and I'm showing you, like future sea level rise projections. This is with 3 meters of sea level rise. This is how much this community will be underwater or be inundated. So if you live in East Palo Alto, I can say mostly the Garden community area and also ones that are closer to the shoreline. Next slide, please. Another aspect of climate change, as I mentioned before, is heat waves. In North Fair Oaks, this is one of their main priority is to address heat wave. In North Fair Oaks, there are no parks, mostly buildings, no trees, there are not enough trees. And what I'm trying to share here with you, as you move closer to Redwood City, the heat waves or the temperature is higher. And as you move closer to Atherton, it's cooler. And why is that? It's because there are more trees in Atherton, which is kind of like helping North Fair Oaks. But because more than 80% of the homes in North Fair Oaks don't have air conditions, they are exposed to extreme heat, which is why the community in North Fair Oaks is prioritizing our work around heat waves and extreme heat. Another aspect of climate change. Next slide, please. Here's another example of a data that I have for Gilroy. So this is a study that was done led by Santa Clara County Health Department 2 years ago. And what we found is that the number of heat waves incidents is increasing, but also more intense. As you can see, as the projections, it used to be only average of 4 extreme heat days. And now we're looking at numbers like 41, 54, 24, 23. This also shows that climate change is already happening, and this is what we can expect. And Gilroy is already a place or a community that's very dry, and also the temperature is always higher compared to the other cities. Next slide, please. So just a recap, that is why my organization is working in many of these cities. And again, our main role is to help communities to adapt. And I'm going to share with you 2 of the main programs that we're doing that we are supporting this effort. Next slide, please. So climate resilient communities, we actually now have 5 core programs. Resilient Home, where we work directly with homeowners and households. We have Resilient Adaptation, where we work directly with community leaders and cities. We have Resilient Education, where we focus our education program on our youth. And also regional leadership. We lead a lot of conversation, both county-wide and statewide. And then the 5th one that we just started in July of this year, beginning of this year, is our disaster preparedness program. Next slide, please. So for our Resilient Home program, and this is what I wanted to share with you all today, this is where we work directly with households. And it's very important, as I mentioned, the impacts of climate change, heat waves, also things like flooding in East Palo Alto. Flooding is one of the key climate impacts. And so many times we work with families to reduce their exposure to molds, development of molds in the home or outside of the home. Also, we help families to access free solar program and also minor home repair program. These programs have existed way before CRC came about, but because they existed, and the government have allocated funding to them, to the program, many of the households and families in the communities that we serve didn't know about it. And if they did, the application to get the program was too big or too much for them to apply. And so there are many barriers, or even the language. The language was a barrier. So very low uptake of the program, and that's why CRC, our role is that we provide a case management role, meaning we help families, we share the information, and if a household agrees to it, we help them apply from the start to the end of the project. So some of our families have received, one home has received minor home repair, which means maybe putting in new windows, fixing a door. Some families have received solar panels through the Grid Alternatives program. And if families that were eligible for solar panels have old roofs, we were also able to access services for them from other bigger organizations like Habitat for Humanity and Rebuilding Together. So this is a program where we really help families because many times, many of the homeowners are elderly homeowners, and they are now living off of fixed income, right? So they don't have a lot of resources available to maintain their home. So the biggest, next slide, please. So one of the biggest issues that we faced is deferred maintenance. Many of these homes have all these different issues, and just because they don't have the money to fix it. So we've walked in homes where there's no ventilation in the kitchen, or there is a ventilation and it's not working, or there are a lot of molds, which is a health hazard. And unfortunately, many times families didn't know that. And these are the communities and cities where asthma attacks are very high. And so we always find these issues in the homes that we work with, even like, very old kitchen, just don't have the money to repair. And so we seek out funding to help these families that we enrolled. Next slide, please.
Violet, if I can interrupt, there is a question
Yeah,
in the
sure.
chat about the take-up rate on these programs. I don't know if you were going to talk about how you find folks that are good matches for these funds, but
Yeah.
do you find that the people you approach are really excited about the funds, or do you have can you explain that process a bit?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is it's walking with families, with the homeowner or the head of the household through the program. Before, when we started this program, I did a lot of community outreach, meaning I will hold meetings, at the YMCA, at the library, senior center, to tell them about this program. When we started, many of the families didn't know about the minor home repairs. And so as soon as we started the work, it didn't really help us in the beginning. But what really helped us was when we started implementing projects. So then the homes and the families that we've helped became our messenger. So now I don't really do any outreach. A lot of the people are just calling our number, right? They heard from a neighbor. So now I'm like struggling to continue to bring in money for these projects because we have a very long list of families that need different supports.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide, if you don't mind. So this is an example. I just want to share with you a little bit of like a relationship with a homeowner, a family in East Palo Alto. This is Mele. These are all the repairs that we have provided for her and her family since we started working. So it really, it's different, right? We walk in the home, we do an assessment with the family, and then we kind of like prioritize what do we need to do first. And if, we are lucky, we're getting more resources, we continue to work with that family until all their needs are met. So these are all the home repairs that we have provided. Next slide, please, Samantha. And then this family also got lucky with our new relationship, a new partner with IKEA that we also help provide furnitures. So this is a new partnerships. These are all our partners in the program. And this is how we are able to help the families. We recently also got funding from San Mateo County Measure K, so we will continue to provide the service, more services to the communities. Next slide, please. And this is an example of Millis history, right? We started off with weather stripping, 2019, 2020. We continue to work with them and help the family to house painting, new refrigerator, 2022 induction. We've electrified some of their equipments in the home. And this is the new project where today, which is, part of it is IKEA. This family will also get a whole new kitchen from IKEA, right? And this is like a pilot project that, we enrolled them in. Next slide, please. But I wanted to say that many of the families that we've served, most of them didn't have the resources to make those changes in their home, but they were also vulnerable to climate change. Many of the families had broken windows, had broken doors, or some family cases we've worked with them to remove asbestos. So all the other health hazard materials that may impact the families, we were able to help. But this is another example, another project. Samantha, make sure that I'm on time, please. Just let me know how many minutes I have. I'm gonna run through these quick too.
And you're doing great.
Okay, so this is another program of ours where we help with family and their homes is our resilient adaptation. I mentioned that in East Palo Alto, flooding is an issue. And so one of the key project that was prioritized by community leaders was for us to implement a rain garden cistern system program. And this is to help reduce flooding around the home, and also help capture the excess water from the building so that the family can hold that water and use it when there's a need. But also we are building a garden that can hold water, but also can, families can like grow things that they want to see on their property. So this has my organization received almost $1 million to pilot this garden idea. So we're currently building this in East Palo Alto. We've already built our 7th system. We will continue to build until we reach our 25 rain gardens, and therefore homeowners only. The great thing about this project is that the families that have already received the rain gardens are already telling us that, it really does limit flooding on their property. And so, and they're very, very happy with the cistern system. And hopefully we will be successful in securing more funding so that we can continue building beyond 25 rain gardens. Next slide, please. So this is that's all part of our community work. We engage the community in building these systems, but the benefit is mostly for the homeowners and households. And if we build thousands of this, then it will really help reduce flood risk in East Palo Alto. And that's kind of like our overall goal. So here is a photo of one of the systems that we've built. This is one system for one homeowner. So she is collecting all the rainwater that she can. And with these 25 rain gardens that we're building in East Palo Alto, we expect to save about 43 gallons of water a year. So yeah, we look at it in a way where, here in California, we're going to have drought. We're going to have intense rainfall. There's a lot of uncertainties around climate change. So we need to, these are kind of those tangible projects that we can actually, kind of like help us to respond to this, to the climate that we have today. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is the last project that I want to share with you all. I know that all of you, your main role is to care for our young ones. We also feel that obligation. East Palo Alto, Belhaven, have the highest asthma attack rates in San Mateo County. So one of our priority projects was to help with indoor air quality in the homes. We have another project where we are actually collecting data from indoor, from people's homes, about 330 homes. And already what we have seen is that the indoor air quality is worse than outdoor air quality. And that's why our team in Belhaven immediately wanted to do a campaign where we can offer air purifiers to people, anyone in the home that is vulnerable to pollution. So we have done this. We continue to give away air purifiers at no cost. And we've also gotten an air purifier system that will also not add any burden to the PG&E bill. So we did a fundraise 2 years ago, and we received funding to distribute air purifiers to people, especially families that have with kids, the most vulnerable populations like the elders and also the young ones. Next slide, please. And just here giving you just a map of where the information is collected and also how bad the air is. And you can see here in Belhaven, for example, the air quality there is worse than the other part of Menlo Park. Next slide, please. So here is, again, our Breath of Air campaign, a climate change community team idea, which is also a community idea. And then we worked with our faith-based organizations to fundraise, and we were able to give away the air purifiers to help improve the indoor air quality. Next slide, please. Oh, and that's my last slide. I hope that I've been able to present some of the work that we are doing, hopefully connected to the work that you're doing. But I'm always happy to respond to any emails if you want to learn more. Please, you can find me at my email or even like reach out through our website. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Violet. That was such a great presentation. I do have a question for you in the chat, a few that I think are all about eligibility. And I think they popped up around the resilient homes section. So geographies that are eligible, and then do you have renters that you work with, or is it only folks that own their home?
Yeah, we also work with renters. So a lot of the government programs are for homeowners. But right now, we're also working on including renters. So CRC, that's why we have our own program where we don't really look at any eligibility, like if you're a homeowner or a renter. If it's a renter who needs help, we help them. But a lot of the government structure right now is mostly for homeowners, which is why that question is valid. But at the same time, we are now exploring ways where we can also support renters in this program. So, for example, in San Mateo County, there is Peninsula Clean Energy. So they also have some programs where renters can actually access resources, and we can help them access those resources.
And do you have to be located in San Mateo County to be eligible?
No, a lot of these programs are available, both San Mateo, Santa Clara. We just
Okay.
have to find, for CRC, we work specifically in San Mateo County for the resilient home, but we're actually expanding to Santa Clara. So we already have partners in Santa Clara. So for us, it's really about knowing where the resources are, and we can pull them together for for the homes, right? So for example, we had a church who learned about our program here and reached out to us to get some resources. We have Habitat for Humanity. They have a group in San Mateo. They also have a group in Santa Clara. So it's just knowing where the information is, and we can make the connection to get that help to the family or to the or any community spaces that need support.
Wonderful. And the last question in the chat, I'm sure it's on some other folks' minds. How can I apply? Is this funding available? Is there a line I have to wait in? If they're interested, or do you have other groups or resources that you could connect interested folks in for the Resilient Homes program?
Please go on our website. So it's anyone can apply, and my team will actually help you figure out where, because we always do an assessment because there are a lot of resources and it really depends on your priorities, right? So there's a lot of resources out there. We're still building on our resources. There are new opportunities that we are exploring. We hope to provide more resources to the families. So just get connected to us. My team will reach out, have an opportunity to have a conversation with you, and then they can help build up your program. Like I said, many of the families, we've worked with them since 2019, and we continue to work with them. As long as there's a program that we can help with, we will continue to share resources with our family. So be part of
Wonderful.
our ecosystem, reach out, and we will make sure that we will respond.
Wonderful. So yeah, to summarize, San Mateo County and Santa Clara County residents are eligible. Do you have any connections or ideas of other folks that live in other parts of the state, if they're in need of climate resilient changes to their home? Or is it kind of a
where,
growing
for
field?
example?
Like Eureka or San Diego or Riverside or somewhere else in the state. Is there a network that you are aware of?
There are networks, yes. I think we can find it. Yeah, we can probably
Amazing.
find it. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I can drop the CRC website in the chat. It looks like they're kind of a first stop shop for these sort of projects. So yeah, even if you're not in other counties, contact them. And Kristen, thanks for putting that in the chat. You can contact your county housing department to ask questions about local organizations. Thank you so much, Violet. We're going to move on, but you'll be sticking around for the end if there's more questions. Okay, so at Build Up, we are really concerned about how climate change impacts children specifically. So I want to make connections between Violet's presentation about community design and our physical homes and how those can be an intervention place for protecting us against extreme weather events and climate change, and more Build Up's angle, which is childcare facilities as that intervention point. So we first have to start by understanding how children are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Violet shared a lot of these issues already, but I'm gonna have Isabel drop in the chat a report from the Environmental Protection Agency that I love that is really informative about the different areas of children's development that are impacted by climate change. So the first is extreme heat. Children under 12 months old are especially vulnerable to this, especially related to their brain development, because those first 5 years are such extreme. There's such extreme development occurring. Extreme heat can really interrupt that. Children also have a harder time regulating their own body temperature. And related to all things climate, they are not the agents of their own environment. So they can't walk into a cooler room. They have a harder time remembering to reach for water. So it's really important that caregivers are aware of extreme heat. Violet touched on this. Air pollution is another danger. Children's lungs are still in development, and kids actually breathe 50% more air in proportion to their bodies compared to adults. So they're breathing more, they're exposed to more pollutants in the air. Flooding is also a hazard. There can be risk of injury or drowning. Flooding also ties into the seasonality and allergies hazard. Come with flooding comes not only damage to our homes, our community, sidewalks, hazardous to walk around in, but it also brings in a lot of standing water, which bugs love. They love warmer environments. They also love warmer weather, and standing water. So that can bring upon more infectious disease, and these longer seasons, like warmer summers, colder winters, can change the seasonality and bring just greater periods of allergies season, which can be really uncomfortable for children. All of these bunched together can have a negative impact on children's mental health. Displacement brought by flooding or a climate disaster like a fire, just seeing your own caregiver stressed out because of the effects of climate change or extreme heat, that can have an impact on your child's mental health. So we know that children bear the brunt of the climate burden despite having the least responsibility for causing it. And that combined with all these reasons I just mentioned are kind of the driving force of why we are applying a climate lens to our own childcare facilities work. So climate change also impacts the operations of childcare facility, in addition to the wear and tear that can be caused by constant sun exposure, extreme weather events. Keeping a childcare open requires a lot of energy. Both electric and gas energy are sources that are normally necessary to keeping the lights on, warming or cooling buildings with heaters and air conditioners. Providers are often doing regular loads of laundry or running the dishes every day. And some providers that offer home pickup and drop off have transportation expenses. And all of these activities release their own carbon emissions. And we know this is not the fault of the provider, it's a reality of the field. But because providers often run on pretty small margins, converting or renovating facilities that are going to be energy efficient and really stand the test of time is often financially out of reach. However, in California, as many of us on the call know, there have been grant opportunities already specifically to improve childcare facilities. The first round of funding was this $200.5 million. For minor repairs and renovations, we had over 3,500 grantees receive awards. And then we were happy to have a second round of funding that was for new construction and major renovation. That pot of money was for $150 million. And you can see we had over 1,200 providers apply, but only 232 grantees of today have been selected for awards. This is primarily because these new construction and major renovation projects are larger in scale, so more expensive in cost. So fewer awards could be given for the allocated funds for this project. So the organization I work at, the Low Income Investment Fund, helps to administer this grant program. So it's been really interesting to see that providers know about these climate impacts on their facilities because they've been asking for them in their grant applications. So 44% of them asked for HVAC repairs or replacements, 35% air purifiers. A lot of folks asked for solar panels, which were not eligible expenses for these grants, but providers know that their energy bills have been going up and it's a great swap to make. Generators, we saw a lot of this in more rural parts of California where power outages were common. And then shade structure is huge. Turf is an option for some folks that have trouble watering consistently. And then energy efficient windows, like how to insulate your house so that the temperature remains cool in the summer and warm in the winters. So when we're talking about making these climate resilient swaps or renovations, or when we're talking about new construction, a lot of what Violet mentioned are applicable, especially to family homes. but also childcare centers. But there's a few things that we like to focus on that are specific to childcare. Shade structures is a huge one, especially in California, and having roof replacements that our provider will speak about later, and Violet mentioned drought-resistant gardening and heat-tolerant play structures. We also like to highlight that while these replacements like come at a different speed and time for different providers, in the future, we're going to want play structures and play spaces that are resilient to the changing environment, and that often means using natural resources and materials to build them. So instead of a metal play structure that absorbs heat, it can be unsafe for children to touch. Play structures made out of wood, tan bark as the ground instead of rubber. Permanent shade structures can be made ultimately from trees that also have air purifying qualities. We think natural resource is a good place to look first before opting for other materials like plastic. And secondly, decarbonizing ECE spaces looks really similar to a private home. Solar power, insulation techniques like energy efficient windows, heat pumps, and electric stoves are all great swaps that are used constantly. Utilities and appliances that are used constantly by childcare providers could really benefit from these swaps. Our final point that we want to make is that while we understand the impacts that the climate change has on young children, a lot of what we want to change about childcare facilities is to make the work environment safe, comfortable, a happy place to work every day for providers. When I go to my office, I expect it to be air conditioned. And I want that for all providers that are working with children every day. And like I said at the beginning of my presentation, these swaps can be expensive, and childcare providers run on really thin margins. And most of our providers are women, and primarily women of color. And this is a huge equity issue for how we're going to intervene in facilities, because the money needs to be targeted moving forward. So yeah, the work environment for providers is an essential piece of this, and we want that to be at the forefront when we're talking about changing childcare facilities. So the best person to speak on that is a provider herself. Angelica Sorto is a family home provider based out of East Palo Alto, where Violet's organization works. She received an infrastructure grant, and she used her funds to do a couple climate related changes. So I'm going to introduce her program officer, Catherine Perez, to briefly talk about that grant. And then Catherine will hand it over to Angelica. Ellis, our interpreter, will now be switching from her interpretation to be hearing Spanish and speaking English. So please make sure, if you're not hearing the right language, that you click the globe and you'll be put into the right audio room depending on your preference. I'll hand it over to Catherine.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Yes, good
Yo soy Angélica
afternoon.
Soto y
I'm
yo soy
Angelica
proveedora de cuidado
Sorto,
infantil
and I'm a childcare
del área
provider
de East Palo Alto.
in the East Palo Alto area.
Vivo en East Palo Alto.
I live in East
Yo
Palo
fui
Alto.
beneficiaria de estos recursos
I've
y
been
lo primero
granted
que
these
hicimos
resources, and the first thing
en
that we
programa
did in the program
Pulgarcito Wonder School,
in
si quieres
Pulgarcito,
poner la siguiente
if you want to,
diapositiva,
oh, okay, the pictures are there in the
fue
slide,
la
was
reparación de
the
nuestro
roof
techo,
repair,
ya que debido a la gran cantidad de
because
lluvia que
there was a
había
lot of
que
rain
hubo el año pasado y el
that
antepasado,
happened last
fuimos
year and
afectados
the
y el
year
agua
before
empezó a
were
inundar el techo
very
del área
affected,
donde tenemos
and then
nuestro
the roof was
programa
full
de
of
cuidado.
water damage
Aquí
where
podemos
we had our
observar cómo
center.
fueron,
Here
cómo
we can
estaba
see
el
that
techo.
how it
Si
looked
quieres
before.
pasar a la siguiente
If
diapositiva.
you can do the next slide, please.
Aquí vemos y mostramos cómo quedó
Here
ahora
we
con la
see how it looks
reparación
right now with the
cuando
with the repairs, when we had the funds from the program, we were
nosotros somos
we
una
had a great
programa
benefit.
que
We
pensamos
were
mucho en lo que
we're a
es el medio
program that
ambiente, los
really
cambios
cares
climáticos.
about
Entonces
the
teníamos el
environment and
programa de
climate
los
change.
paneles solares
And here we can see we use the
y
solar
ahora
panel
quisimos
program as well.
promoverlos y volverlos a
We
poner
moved
hacia
them and we
atrás
put them again
otra vez,
in the back again,
pero el techo quedó
but the
perfecto,
roof
muy
was
bonito.
perfect. Beautiful. And I do believe she's muted, if someone could let her know.
Angélica creo que está en mute.
Los otros fotos que obtuvimos
The
los
other
hicimos
thing that
en
we did
un
with the
shelf
funds,
que ya
we did a
teníamos, igual
shade.
fue reparado.
We
Le
had it
aumentamos un
before, but it was
poquito la
repaired.
longitud para que
We
los
made a little bit
niños,
longer so
cuando
that the
el
kids,
clima nos
when
afecta, como
the
es el
climate is
calor,
affecting us,
o en todo
like when
caso
it's
la
too
lluvia,
hot or
podemos
if it's
estar
raining,
en la área
we
de
can
afuera,
be outside
disfrutar del
still and
aire libre,
enjoy
tener
the
en el
fresh
programa.
air in the program.
Aquí vemos cómo es ahora
We
que
can
cómo
see
estaba al principio
how it looked
y cómo
before,
quedó
and then we can
ahora,
see how it looks
mucho
now.
más grande, mucho más amplia. Si puedes
Bigger,
pasar a la siguiente diapositiva,
prettier. If you can skip
es
to the
como
next
está ahora.
slide, this is how it
Una
looks now.
extensión mayor, aumentamos 12
It's
pies,
longer. We did
está más
12
alto,
more
lo cual
feet.
hace que
It's
sea
taller.
con mayor ventilación
So
y
there's more
nos afecta
ventilation
menos.
and the
Tenemos
heat
mucha
doesn't
más
affect us
cantidad
as
de
much.
sombra.
We have a lot
Si
of
puedes
shade.
pasar a la siguiente
If you
diapositiva,
can do the next
por
slide,
favor.
please.
Lo último que hicimos
The last
fue
thing
poner
that
un
we
aire
did
acondicionado
was get
en
some new air
nuestro salón de
conditioning
clases
in our classroom
porque nos hacía falta, la
because
verdad.
we
Muchas veces
we really
tuvimos
needed
que
it.
estar fuera
We would
porque el
have to
clima
be
dentro del
outside
salón no nos
because
permitía
inside
mucho,
it
el
was
calor era
even
muy
hotter.
fuerte. Ahora tenemos
It
nuestro aire
was a lot. So now
acondicionado,
we have our
que es
AC
tanto
unit.
caliente como
It can
frío.
be
En esta
hot or it
temporada
can be
estamos
cold. We
utilizando
can
el
use it in the
aire
summer or the
frío,
winter.
podemos
And
dormir, podemos hacer
we can
actividades,
take naps, we can do
todo dentro de
activities
nuestro salón
inside,
de clases.
all inside of our
Y la verdad que
classroom.
los niños lo están
And the
disfrutando mucho,
kids
las
really
familias nos
enjoy
han
it. The
felicitado
families have
porque están muy
congratulated
contentos,
us because
porque
the
los niños
kids are
igual
very
están
happy.
contentos. El programa está en
So the
East Palo
program
Alto.
is in
Ellos saben que somos una
East
comunidad de
Palo Alto.
bajos
We're
recursos,
a
pero
low-income
luchamos por
community,
tener muchos recursos
but we
para
fight to have those
alcanzar
resources
metas y que
so
la
that we can meet our
comunidad o
goals
las
and that
familias que
the
participan en el
community or the
programa
families that are
estén
in the
contentas y
program
felices
are happy,
y nuestros niños
and
alcancen
so that
un
our
mejor desarrollo.
kids have a better development.
Sí, y yo soy Catherine Pérez.
And I'm
Yo soy
Catherine
la persona
Perez,
que ha trabajado
the
junto con
person that
Angélica
has
para
worked
guiarla
with
con
Angelica
la beca que le
to
dieron. Ella
help
fue
her with the
aprobada
grant
la beca
that
de
she was given.
California
She had
para
the
las
California
innovaciones
grant
menores.
with minor
Angélica
reparations.
aplicó la solicitud en el
She
2022
applied
y
in
recibió los
2022
fondos a principios del
and received her
2024 de
funds
este
at the
año.
beginning of
Entonces, en
2024
el
this year.
tiempo que
And
ella
so in the
tuvo que
time
esperar
that
para los
she had to
fondos,
wait for
sus
the funds,
prioridades también
her
cambiaron
priorities
debido a las fuertes
changed
lluvias que hubieron
because
en
of the
todos
heavy
esos
rains that we had
inviernos
between those
y cambios
winters
climáticos en
and
su área, el
the
calor y
climate
todo
changes in
eso.
her area,
Entonces,
the heat and everything.
pudimos trabajar junto
So
con ella para
we
cambiar,
were
hacer
able to work with her
esos cambios y
so that
enfocarnos en los
we can
que
make
son de más
those changes
prioridad,
and focus
porque también
on the
muchos de los
priorities because
gastos
there was
ya habían subido de precio
a lot of the
y pues
prices
no
or
se
the
pudo
expenses
hacer
were
todo lo que
higher. So we
había
couldn't do everything
aplicado, pero sí
that she
pudimos
applied
hacer
for,
lo que
but we
fue de
could
más
do
prioridad
the
para el
most and the
cambio de clima.
priority that we had because of the climate change.
Thank you so much, both Angelica and Catherine, for joining. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Feel free to put them in the chat, and I can also bring you off mute. I have a question. I wonder like how the improvements impacted Angelica, yourself, and your staff.
El impacto es muy positivo
The
porque
impact
ahora tenemos un espacio
was positive now
acondicionado
because we have a
en
better
cuanto
conditioned
al lo
space.
que es el clima.
because
necesitamos calor,
if we're
así que
talking about
tenemos
climate,
nuestro
if it's
aire
hot, we
acondicionado
have
que
our
nos ayuda a
AC
estar
that
frescos.
help us keep
Entonces,
cool.
esto
And
al
so
desarrollo de los niños es
this to
muy,
the
muy
kids'
importante.
development is very, very important.
Nuestro shell, nuestro porch que tenemos nuevo, pues los
Our
niños quieren estar afuera
shade that we
mucho
have that it's
tiempo,
new, a lot of the
entonces
kids want to
podemos
be outside a
estarlo,
lot, so we can be outside.
no tenemos, no
Uh,
nos afecta el calor,
it's not affecting us that much, the heat.
solamente que esté muy fuerte,
Um,
estamos dentro, pero
if
podemos estar
if
afuera
the heat
mucho
is
tiempo, hacer nuestras actividades de
very,
pintar, colorear,
very extra
fuera
hot,
de lo que
we
es
will stay
nuestro
inside, but
salón
we
de
can go
clases,
outside,
un
we can
espacio
color,
abierto
we can
completamente.
use an open space
Entonces ha
as
sido muy
well.
positivo.
It has been a very positive impact.
Wonderful. Any other
Muy
questions
bien.
for Angelica?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
wonderful. Well, that concludes all of our presentation.
Can I just ask one question, Samantha? One
Yeah,
question.
please,
I was
please. I'm
wondering
gonna open it up.
if they are interested in trees, because we can bring in a program to plant more trees in the
Oh,
backyard.
Sería importante o
That
sería,
would be very
sí, yo creo
important
que
for
sí,
us. I think we
porque
would really
tenemos
like that because
nuestros planteros
we have our
y es un área pues pequeña.
pots for our
Desgraciadamente
plants, but
nuestro
it's a
vecino
very
nos
small
cortó un
area.
árbol enorme que
Our
teníamos,
neighbor
es su casa de él,
cut down
pero
a huge tree that
lo
we
cortó,
had.
simplemente
It
lo
wasn't
cortó. Pero
his to
hace
cut, but he
unos
did it.
5 o 6
Um,
años
it
participamos
was
y
around
pusimos 3
5 or
árboles
6 years
nuevos
ago.
en
We got 3 more
nuestro
trees
espacio verde que tenemos
in our
dentro de
green
lo que
space
es
that
el
we have
jardín infantil. Sería
inside,
importante.
but it's very important.
Y alguien puso algo en el chat, se lo
Someone
voy a
wrote
leer
in
en
the
voz
chat,
alta.
I'm gonna read it out
Olivia
loud.
dijo, en mi daycare tenemos un techo para
Olivia
sombra
said,
extendido
we have a
y fue
shade at my
afectado
daycare
por las
and it's
lluvias y
extended,
no he
but it was
podido
affected by
reparar
the rains
esto.
and we haven't been able to
El
fix it.
boiler se descompuso y
Um,
estaba tirando
the boiler
agua
broke
y
and it
tuve
was
que
leaking water and I
reemplazarlo
had to
por uno
replace
nuevo
it for a
porque
new
se
one
ocupaba el
because
nuevo.
we needed a new
Pero
one.
para hacer este
But
tuve
to
que
be able to do that,
endeudarme
I
pidiendo
had to
crédito
get
para los
loans and
gastos y he
credits,
ocupado
and
asistencia para
I've
cosas
needed
así,
assistance for
pero
stuff like
nunca
that,
he
but I've
podido
never
poner
been able
ayuda
to get any
alguna.
help.
También el sistema de
Our
aire
air
tuvo
system
que
as
ser
well had to be
reemplazado
replaced for a
por
new
un
one
nuevo porque
because
estaba
the one we had
desafinado
wasn't
y también
working, and
tengo
I'm
deuda con
also
eso.
I also owe money because of that as
Estas
well.
son cosas que
So these are
vemos
things
mucho en el
that we
trabajo
see a
que
lot
hacemos, que
in the
estos
work that we
gastos
do.
son muy
This
costosos y pues
particular
hay
situations are
necesidad de
very
mucha ayuda en la
costly and
comunidad.
people need
Yo
help
sé
in
que la
community.
beca
I
que
know that the
Angélica
grant
recibió se
that
fue en todo
Angelica got,
California.
it was for
Entonces, ahorita
all
no
of
estoy muy segura
California.
si hay más becas
So
para
I'm
esto,
not too sure
pero creo que
if there's any
podemos
more grants for that, but
ver
I think
y
that we
agarrar
can
su correo
look it up,
electrónico o
get
algo
your
así
email or
para
something like
ponernos
that
en
so that
contacto con usted
we
para ver
can
si hay
be in
más
contact with you to see if
ayuda que
there's
podemos
some
ofrecerle.
more help or support that we can offer you.
thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Violet, for asking. That's a great local connection you guys just made. Are there any other questions? I saw the question about alternatives to turf. Isabel shared a report that's about those sort of surface alternatives that I think has good options, but it's really specific to where you are, what your access to watering is, if it floods often, maybe tan bark or wood chips aren't a good option. So check out that report. I see another one. Do you have any websites or infographics, et cetera, that have the impacts of heat, climate change on children and providers? Yes, that Environmental Protection Agency report that Isabel shared in the chat is a great place to start. It's a little more scientific. The Early Years Climate Action Plan goes into detail about that. Violet, do you have any other resources that you want to plug related to how we are impacted by climate change? I think there's really good infographics in the Early Years report.
Yeah, and I can share that with you. You could share with the rest of
Excellent.
the folks here.
Excellent. Good question. Any Any other questions that I missed? All right. The last thing we do at these build-up meetings is ask you to fill out a closing survey about what you gleaned from this, if it was helpful, so that we can tweak our future network meetings to meet your needs. So Isabel's going to put that link in the chat. I'll be here until 2 p.m. if you have any other questions, but thank you all so much for joining and for being flexible and riding with our multilingual meeting. Thank you, Violet, so much for joining. Thank you, Angelica, so much for joining. I loved hearing your perspectives and having this sort of East Palo Alto case study as we march forward with our state advocacy. Thanks, everyone.